My name is Kinsley. I'm 35 years old, and I've been a single mother for 2 years now. This morning, as I prepared breakfast for my 7-year-old daughter Emma in our cozy apartment kitchen, I heard her sweet laughter echoing from the living room. That sound fills me with more joy than I ever felt in my previous life. Looking back, becoming a single mom was easier than staying with a cheating husband. I stayed too long ignoring signs and making excuses until I saw the truth with my own eyes. Before I dive into my story, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever ignored red flags in a relationship, and don't forget to subscribe, because what I'm about to share will show you why sometimes the scariest decision becomes your greatest salvation. 10 years ago, I met Brad at a charming coffee shop in downtown Portland. I was 25, working as an interior designer full of dreams and ambition. Brad was this brilliant software engineer with the most captivating smile and infectious laugh. Every Friday, he'd surprise me with sunflowers because he remembered they were my favorite. Those early days felt magical, like we were living in our own romantic movie. We dated for 2 wonderful years before getting married. Brad was everything I thought I wanted in a husband. Smart, ambitious, funny, and he made me feel like the center of his universe. We bought this beautiful suburban house in Oregon, with a white picket fence and a garden where I could grow my own flowers. When Emma was born, I made the decision to leave my career behind, to become a full-time mother. Brad encouraged this, saying our family was his top priority and he'd work hard to provide for us. Those early years of marriage were some of the happiest times of my life. Every evening, Brad would come home from work and tell us about his day, while Emma giggled on his lap playing with his tie. We had this sweet routine where we'd watch Disney movies together after dinner. Emma would fall asleep between us on the couch, and Brad would gently carry her to bed while I tidied up the kitchen. I gave up my dream of opening my own interior design studio because I believed being a wife and mother was more fulfilling than any career could be. Brad was climbing the corporate ladder, quickly earning promotions and raises that allowed us to live very comfortably. I was proud of my successful husband and felt grateful for the life we'd built together. But slowly, things began to change. Brad started working longer hours, coming home later each night. He explained that he was working on this crucial project that could determine his entire career trajectory. I believed him completely because I trusted him with every fiber of my being. He seemed more distracted during our family time, constantly checking his phone and giving short responses when I asked about his day. I told myself this was just a temporary phase that would pass once his important project was completed. The changes in Brad's behavior became more noticeable as weeks turned into months. He suddenly developed an interest in fitness, joining an expensive gym and working out after his already long days at the office. This was completely out of character for the man who used to say his idea of exercise was walking from the couch to the refrigerator. He started buying expensive new clothes, designer shirts, and tailored suits that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. The cologne was another red flag I chose to ignore. Brad had worn the same light, fresh scent for our entire relationship, but suddenly he switched to this heavy, musky fragrance that was so strong I could smell it on his clothes even after they'd been washed. When I mentioned that I preferred his old cologne, he became defensive, saying he was tired of smelling like a teenager and wanted something more sophisticated for his professional image. His relationship with his phone changed dramatically. Brad had always been casual about his device, leaving it on the kitchen counter while he showered or letting Emma play games on it. Now he carried it everywhere, even taking it into the bathroom. The phone would ring at the strangest times, 11 at night or 5 in the morning, and he'd immediately jump up to answer it outside. His explanation was always the same: international clients in different time zones who needed urgent consultation. Our credit card statements started showing charges that didn't make sense. Expensive restaurants on days when Brad claimed to be eating at his desk. High-end stores I'd never heard of. When I asked about these purchases, he always had reasonable explanations. The restaurant charges were for client dinners, and he'd ordered extra food to bring back to colleagues working late. The shopping was for employee appreciation gifts or professional wardrobe updates required for his new position. My friend Sarah started acting strangely around me at social gatherings. She'd give me these sympathetic looks and quickly change the subject whenever I mentioned Brad's demanding work schedule. At the company holiday party, several of Brad's colleagues seemed uncomfortable talking to me, offering awkward comments about how challenging it must be to have a husband who worked such long hours. Their wives would touch my arm gently and give me knowing looks that made my stomach twist with unease. Brad's temper became shorter and more unpredictable. He'd snap at me for minor things like leaving dishes in the sink overnight or forgetting to pick up his dry cleaning. When I suggested planning date nights or family activities for the weekends, he'd accuse me of being needy and not understanding the pressure he was under at work. If I asked too many questions about his schedule, he'd say I was being paranoid and suspicious that I spent too much time alone and was starting to imagine problems that didn't exist. Emma began asking questions that broke my heart into pieces. "Why doesn't Daddy eat dinner with us anymore, Mommy?" she'd ask with those big brown eyes full of confusion. I'd make excuses telling her that Daddy was working extra hard to take care of our family, but inside I felt like I was slowly disappearing in my own home. Every night I'd sit alone on our couch after putting Emma to bed, wondering if I was losing my mind, or if my marriage was quietly falling apart. I kept convincing myself that I was just being oversensitive, that all marriages went through difficult periods. That Tuesday morning in early March, when I decided to surprise Brad with lunch at his office, started like any other day. I spent the morning making his favorite chicken salad sandwiches and fresh baked chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe his mother had taught me during our first year of marriage. Emma was at school, and I thought it would be romantic to show up unexpectedly at Brad's workplace. Maybe I could convince him to take a proper lunch break, and we could reconnect like we used to. Walking into Brad's office building, I felt nervous excitement like a teenager surprising her boyfriend. The lobby was impressive, all glass and steel with modern art on the walls. When I approached the reception desk, I met Jessica for the first time. She was absolutely stunning, probably 26 years old, with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She was wearing a form-fitting dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and her makeup was flawless. When I told Jessica I was Brad's wife and had brought him lunch, something strange flickered across her face. It was just for a split second, but I caught it. A look of surprise mixed with what almost seemed like guilt or panic. She quickly composed herself and buzzed Brad's office, but I noticed her voice changed as she said, "Your wife is here to see you." There was a long pause before Brad responded, longer than seemed natural for such a simple message. When Brad finally came down to the lobby, his reaction wasn't what I'd expected. Instead of being pleased or surprised, he looked genuinely annoyed. He thanked me for the lunch but said he was too busy to eat with me, claiming he had back-to-back meetings all afternoon that he couldn't postpone. The way Jessica watched our entire interaction made my skin crawl. She pretended to be busy with paperwork, but I could feel her eyes on us the whole time, studying our dynamic. That evening I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in my chest. Something about that interaction felt deeply wrong, though, and I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. I decided to go through our credit card statements more carefully than I ever had before. What I discovered made my blood run cold and my hands shake with disbelief. There were charges at luxury hotels on specific dates when Brad had claimed to be working late at the office. Expensive purchases from jewelry stores, including a significant charge from Tiffany & Co. that I'd never seen before. Restaurant bills from romantic establishments that Brad and I had never visited together, meals that were clearly for two people based on the itemized receipts. When I confronted Brad about these mysterious charges, he had explanations ready for everything. The hotel charges were for important client meetings that required privacy, he said. The jewelry purchase was for employee appreciation gifts for his team members who'd been working overtime on the big project. The restaurant bills were business dinners with crucial customers who preferred upscale dining experiences. But something about his explanations felt rehearsed and hollow. I could see him calculating his words before speaking, measuring each response carefully. The spontaneous, genuine man I'd married had been replaced by someone who seemed to be performing a role. Sleep became impossible during this period. I'd lie in bed next to Brad, studying his face in the darkness and wondering how long this deception had been going on. How many lies had I believed without question? How many obvious signs had I rationalized away because I was too trusting, too afraid to face the possibility that my perfect marriage was built on deception? Sarah finally sat me down over coffee and gently suggested that maybe I needed to find concrete answers instead of driving myself crazy with speculation. She recommended a private investigator, someone discreet, who could either put my fears to rest or give me the truth I needed to move forward. The week I waited for the private investigator's findings was the most agonizing 7 days of my life. I had to maintain a facade of normalcy around Emma, helping her with homework and making her favorite meals while my heart was breaking with uncertainty. I had to kiss Brad goodbye each morning, knowing he might be leaving to spend the day with another woman. The investigator finally called on a Friday afternoon, his voice serious, as he said he had evidence I needed to see in person. The manila envelope he handed me felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside were dozens of photographs that completely shattered my world and everything I thought I knew about my life. There was Brad holding hands with Jessica as they walked into the downtown Marriott Hotel. Pictures of them kissing passionately in the parking garage of his office building. Images of them sharing intimate dinners at restaurants I'd only dreamed of visiting. In one particularly painful photograph, Jessica was wearing a diamond necklace I immediately recognized from our credit card statement the expensive Tiffany purchase Brad had claimed was for employee gifts. The investigator's detailed report revealed that Brad and Jessica had been carrying on their affair for at least 8 months, possibly longer. They maintained regular rooms at 3 different upscale hotels across the city. Jessica had been telling her friends and coworkers that Brad was planning to leave his wife soon and that they were discussing moving in together. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, documented with timestamps and locations that perfectly matched the suspicious charges on our credit cards. I sat in my car outside the investigator's office, sobbing uncontrollably as I looked through each photograph. The man I'd loved and trusted for nearly a decade, the father of my precious daughter, had been living a completely double life. Every late night, every business dinner, every explanation I'd accepted without question had been carefully constructed, lies designed to hide his betrayal. Instead of driving straight home to confront Brad, I made an impulsive decision that changed everything. I drove directly to the Marriott Hotel, where the investigator had told me Brad was meeting Jessica that very afternoon. My hands were trembling as I parked and walked through the elegant lobby, clutching those devastating photographs like evidence in a criminal trial. I had no clear plan, just an overwhelming need to see him with my own eyes and watch him try to explain away the undeniable truth. I found them in the hotel's upscale bar, sitting in an intimate corner booth, like lovers without a care in the world. Jessica was wearing the Tiffany necklace from the photographs, and Brad was gently stroking her hand while whispering something that made her throw her head back and laugh. The sound of her carefree laughter felt like a knife twisting in my chest. When they finally noticed me approaching their table, the color completely drained from both their faces. Jessica actually tried to pull her hand away from Brad's, but it was far too late for that pathetic gesture. 8 months, I said calmly, throwing the stack of photographs onto the table between them. 8 months you've been lying directly to my face every single day. Jessica mumbled some incoherent excuse about needing to leave and practically ran from the bar. But Brad remained frozen in place, staring at the photographic evidence of his betrayal spread across the polished wood table. For the first time in months, he was completely speechless, unable to come up with another clever lie or believable excuse. "Kinsley, please, I can explain this," he finally stammered, but I immediately cut him off. "Don't you dare," I said, surprised by how steady and strong my voice sounded. "Don't you dare try to explain this away like you've been doing for months. I trusted you completely. I gave up my entire career for you. I spent 8 years of my life building what I thought was our future together, and this is how you repay that devotion." What happened next surprised even me. Brad completely broke down, admitting to everything without any further attempts at deception. He confessed that he'd felt trapped in our marriage ever since Emma was born, that he thought I'd become boring and predictable as a stay-at-home mother. Jessica made him feel young and exciting again. He said, like the ambitious man he used to be before he was tied down with family responsibilities. Each cruel word felt like a physical blow, but instead of crumbling under the pain, I felt something unexpected rising within me. Strength. He begged desperately for forgiveness, promising to end the affair immediately and completely cut Jessica out of his life. He suggested we could attend marriage counseling together and work through this crisis as a team. He swore that Jessica meant nothing to him compared to our family, and that he'd made a terrible mistake he was willing to spend years making up for. But as I listened to his frantic pleading, I realized something that shocked me to my core. I wasn't interested in saving our marriage anymore. I was completely done. I slapped Brad across the face, right there in that upscale hotel bar, and told him with absolute certainty that I wanted a divorce. Then I walked out with my head held high, leaving him sitting alone with the photographic evidence of his betrayal scattered across the table. Driving home to Emma, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, pure, overwhelming relief. The uncertainty was finally over. The web of lies had been completely exposed. Now I could start fighting for the life my daughter and I truly deserved. But Brad had no intention of making our divorce simple or amicable. The man who'd begged for forgiveness just hours earlier suddenly transformed into a ruthless adversary, hiring one of Portland's most expensive and aggressive divorce attorneys to fight me for everything. He claimed that since I hadn't worked outside the home in 6 years, I was financially irresponsible and therefore unfit to be Emma's primary caregiver. He argued that he deserved to keep our house because he'd been the sole breadwinner throughout our marriage. Most outrageously, he actually requested that I pay him alimony, claiming that news of his affair had damaged his professional reputation and earning potential. I refused to be intimidated by his legal tactics or financial advantages. I found my own attorney, a fierce woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in representing wives who'd been financially controlled and manipulated by unfaithful husbands. Patricia helped me meticulously document every lie Brad had told, every hidden expense he'd incurred during his affair, and every way he'd used our family's resources to fund his double life. We built an ironclad case that exposed not just his infidelity, but his systematic financial deception. The pressure of suddenly needing to support myself and Emma was overwhelming. I had to find employment immediately, but after 6 years away from the workforce, my interior design skills felt outdated and rusty. I spent countless late nights updating my portfolio, researching current design trends, and applying for positions while Emma slept. The rejections came frequently at first, with many employers questioning my long gap in employment or offering positions with salaries far below what I needed to survive. Sarah became my absolute lifeline during this impossible period, picking Emma up from school when I had job interviews and babysitting when I needed to work late. She never once made me feel like a burden, constantly reminding me that I was brave and strong for choosing to fight for a better life. Her unwavering support gave me the courage to keep pushing forward when everything seemed hopeless. My first job offer came from a small interior design firm that specialized in budget-friendly home transformations. The salary was barely enough to cover our basic living expenses, but it represented something invaluable to me: independence. For the first time in 6 years, I was earning my own money and rebuilding my professional identity. My boss, Maria Santos, was incredibly understanding about my situation and offered flexibility when I needed to handle divorce-related appointments or Emma's school events. Working again felt like waking up from a long, suffocating dream. I'd forgotten how much I loved using my creativity to transform spaces and help people create homes that reflected their personalities. My personal experience of making small spaces feel warm and welcoming resonated strongly with clients who were also navigating major life transitions. Word-of-mouth referrals started coming in, and slowly but surely, I began earning more substantial projects. Emma struggled with our dramatically changed circumstances at first. She didn't understand why we'd moved from our spacious house to a small 2-bedroom apartment, or why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. Some nights she'd cry inconsolably, asking when our family was going to be whole again. Those heartbreaking conversations were some of the most difficult moments of my life, but I remained honest with her in age-appropriate ways. I explained that sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love, and that Mommy and Daddy couldn't live together anymore because of those painful choices. Our new apartment was tiny compared to what we were accustomed to, but it quickly became our sanctuary. Emma helped me paint her bedroom a vibrant purple color that Brad would never have approved of in our old house. We hung twinkling fairy lights in every room and created a cozy reading nook by the living room window where we'd curl up together for bedtime stories. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly home, instead of just living in someone else's vision of what our life should look like. The divorce proceedings dragged on for a grueling 8 months, with Brad using every possible tactic to maintain control over our lives. He would show up at my workplace unannounced, claiming he needed to discuss Emma's schedule, but really just trying to intimidate me and disrupt my professional rebuilding. He called Emma's school repeatedly to question my parenting decisions and request changes to pick-up arrangements. Each time he tried these manipulative tactics, however, I grew stronger and more determined to protect Emma and myself from his continued abuse. When we finally had our official day in court, I was prepared with extensive documentation of Brad's affair, his financial deception throughout our marriage, and his ongoing attempts to control and manipulate our divorce proceedings. The judge was clearly unimpressed with a man who'd spent thousands of dollars on his mistress, while simultaneously claiming he couldn't afford reasonable child support. The evidence Patricia and I had assembled painted a clear picture of Brad's character and priorities. In the end, justice prevailed in ways that exceeded my hopes. I was granted primary custody of Emma, with Brad receiving only supervised weekend visitation until he could prove he was providing a stable environment. I received half of our shared marital assets and enough monthly child support to ensure Emma's needs would be consistently met. Most importantly, I walked out of that courtroom knowing that Brad could never again control or manipulate my life or my daughter's future. Learning to navigate single motherhood while simultaneously rebuilding my career felt like learning an entirely new language. Every morning I'd wake up an hour earlier than Emma to drink my coffee in peaceful silence and mentally organize our day. There was no one else to share the endless mental load of parenting, with no one to help with bedtime routines or morning rushes to school. But there was also no one criticizing my parenting choices, questioning my decisions, or making me feel like I was constantly failing as a wife and mother. Emma adapted to our new reality much faster than I'd anticipated. She absolutely loved having complete control over the television remote and being able to choose what we'd eat for dinner each night. We started having what we playfully called adventure meals, where we'd experiment with cooking cuisines from different countries. Our tiny kitchen became a place of laughter and discovery, instead of the stress-filled space it had been when I was constantly worried about having Brad's dinner ready exactly when he walked through the door. My career began flourishing in ways I'd never imagined possible during my marriage. Maria promoted me to senior designer within just 6 months, recognizing my talent and dedication. I started working on increasingly high-end projects, and my personal experience of making small spaces feel like home resonated powerfully with clients who were also navigating major life transitions. Word-of-mouth referrals led to freelance opportunities, and soon I was earning more money than I ever had in my life. Brad continued his predictable pattern of trying to control our lives from a distance, even after our divorce was finalized. He'd call Emma constantly during my designated time with her, filling her head with promises of expensive gifts and elaborate trips that never actually materialized. He'd show up for his scheduled visitation sessions late or cancel at the last minute, always armed with dramatic excuses about work emergencies that required his immediate attention. But Emma was beginning to see through his manipulation, just like I had, recognizing the pattern of broken promises and inconsistent behavior. The most challenging aspect of single motherhood wasn't the practical difficulties of managing everything alone. It was unlearning years of conditioning that had taught me I needed a man's approval to validate my worth as a person. I'd catch myself apologizing to store clerks for taking too long at checkout with Emma, or feeling embarrassed when she had a normal childhood meltdown in public, as if being a single mother automatically made me a failure. It took months of therapy and conscious effort to realize that I was actually a better mother alone than I'd ever been during my marriage. Dr. Martinez, the family therapist. Emma and I started seeing together helped both of us process the trauma of Brad's betrayal and our family's dissolution in healthy ways. Emma learned that adults sometimes make mistakes and bad choices that have absolutely nothing to do with their children's worth or behavior. I learned that choosing to prioritize my own well-being and self-respect wasn't selfish. It was absolutely necessary for both Emma's future and mine. Our weekly therapy sessions became a safe space where we could express our fears honestly and celebrate our victories together. Exactly 1 year after our divorce was finalized, I received news that felt like the final chapter closing on my old life. Emma told me matter-of-factly after one of her weekend visits with Brad that he was marrying Jessica. She mentioned it casually while helping me fold laundry, explaining that Jessica had been wearing a large diamond ring and talking excitedly about wedding plans and honeymoon destinations. Instead of feeling jealous, angry, or betrayed, I felt genuinely relieved and grateful. Brad was officially someone else's responsibility now, and I was completely free to build the authentic life I'd always wanted for Emma and myself. Sitting here today exactly 2 years, after making the terrifying decision to become a single mother, I can honestly say that this life has exceeded every expectation I ever had for happiness and fulfillment. Emma is thriving in ways that amaze and inspire me every single day. She's confident, creative, and has developed this incredible sense of empathy that I believe comes from watching me rebuild our lives from absolutely nothing. She tells her friends proudly that her mom is the strongest person she knows, and hearing those words makes every struggle and sacrifice completely worthwhile. My interior design business has grown far beyond my wildest dreams from those early days of scraping together rent money. I opened my own studio 9 months ago, The same dream I'd abandoned years earlier when I convinced myself that being Brad's wife was more important than being an entrepreneur. My clients are primarily women going through major life transitions like divorce, death, career changes, and empty nest syndrome. Helping them create spaces that reflect their authentic selves and new identities has become both my passion and my purpose in life. I even started dating again 6 months ago, though I'm taking things incredibly slowly and carefully this time. I met Daniel at Emma's school where he works as the art teacher. He's patient, kind, respectful, and most importantly, he treats both Emma and me with the dignity and consideration we deserve. We've been seeing each other for several months now, and he's never once tried to rush me into anything or made me feel like I should be grateful for his attention. He genuinely enjoys our family movie nights and cooking experiments, and he understands completely that Emma and I are an inseparable package deal. But the most valuable lesson I've learned through this entire journey is that I don't need anyone else to complete me or make me whole. I spent so many years believing that being alone automatically meant being lonely, that I needed a husband to feel valuable, successful, or worthy of love and respect. The truth is that leaving Brad wasn't just about escaping a cheating spouse or an unhappy marriage. It was about choosing to believe that I deserved better treatment and that my daughter deserved to see her mother being treated with genuine love and respect. I want every woman watching this video to understand that staying in a destructive relationship because you're afraid of being alone isn't protecting anyone, especially your children. Emma is infinitely happier and more secure now than she ever was when we were constantly walking on eggshells around Brad's unpredictable moods and unreasonable demands. She's learning firsthand that love should lift you up and make you feel valued, not tear you down and make you question your worth. That lesson alone is worth more than any financial security or social status that might come from staying married to the wrong person. The warning signs were there from the very beginning of Brad's affair, clearer than I wanted to admit at the time. The unexplained late nights, the secretive phone behavior, the defensive reactions when I asked reasonable questions about his schedule. I ignored and rationalized away every single red flag because I was terrified of disrupting our comfortable life and admitting that my marriage was failing. But comfort and stability aren't worth sacrificing your self-respect and teaching your children that love includes deception and disrespect. If you're watching this story and recognizing yourself in my experience, please know that you're stronger and more capable than you think you are. You can rebuild your life from scratch, you can thrive independently, and you can show your children what it looks like to choose yourself and demand better treatment. The path isn't easy, and there will be moments when you question whether you made the right decision. But on the other side of that fear and uncertainty is a life of authenticity, self-respect, and genuine happiness that's worth every moment of struggle. Sometimes the life you're most afraid to live alone is exactly the life that will set you completely free and allow you to become the person you were always meant to be. What would you choose if you had to decide right now, staying in comfortable misery or stepping boldly into your own power and potential? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Have you ever ignored obvious red flags in a relationship? What gave you the courage to choose yourself? Please give this video a like if my story resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and discovering your inner strength. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle and that there's always hope for a better future. Thank you so much for listening to my story and allowing me to share this important message with you. Remember, you deserve love that doesn't require you to dim your light or compromise your values. Until next time, keep choosing yourself because you're absolutely worth it.